interesting deal. There's no two ways about it.
Well, let's talk about that on the show then. So we'll get it started here, Darce. So welcome to the Sports Wrap with George and Ringer, whichever way you're looking at that. And geez, here it is, week 3, Zoom style, and we got through our technical snafu, and we're ready to go, George. And we just before we got started here, we were talking about live baseball, and yep. You watched a few innings of Korean baseball.
What was it? The NC something or other, and the Tsunami Lions or the Samsung Lions. Anyway, it was really pretty interesting. The Samsung Lions and the DC Dinos.
Okay.
And so ESPN is carrying it, and it starts late, and sometimes they'll have a doubleheader, so they'll start at 11, and then at 4 o'clock the second game starts, and you can pick that one right up too.
If you're up early, you can watch the last few innings when it gets interesting. Yeah, I guess ESPN's got to do what they've got to do. There are people out there who are addicts who need their baseball. So I guess they found the fix. And as you were stating, there's no fans.
No, and there's cheerleaders up in the board. And they like I say, it's not like American baseball. American baseball cheers when there's something to cheer about. These guys are rumbling, and it's more like a college football game than it is anything. But you can see that the Koreans are just as wound up as we are in terms of live sports. This is cross-cultural, and they want to see some baseball. There's a couple of Americans playing on these teams as well.
Okay.
There's 1 or 2 people that can even speak English. So it's I will watch another game for sure.
So do you think that this is something that American baseball can emulate, or is going to emulate, or wants to emulate and try to do here?
Well, I don't know. I tell you what, the Miami Dolphins came out today with a proposal for football games that would include about 15,000 people per game. Well, that's quite a drop from what do they have, 55 or 60,000 in any of their football games. So they are at least attempting to show some other models here as to what might be tried. And so, yeah, I think that there's probably some things that can be done for it. We're not used to not having any fans.
Yeah, I assume that this Dolphins thing is you're only going to have tickets every other seat, unless you know the person or something along that line. And
then it's going to be complicated. Yeah. I don't know, but whatever it is, these sports teams are losing a lot of money. They're bleeding money, and they're going to try to make a way to stop it. And you and I are hoping they can, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of businesses, not just the sports team. A lot of teams, a lot of businesses losing money right now. And I saw something today that the state we had like a $1.4 billion surplus, and now it's a $2.4 billion deficit. So,
yeah, it went quick. It went quick. And I mean, after the last session, we're thinking, well, the state of Minnesota, we're in good shape. Yeah. And we didn't see this one coming.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, what do you want where do you want to go first? Do you want to start with Don Shula?
Well, we can. I tell you, Don Shula was what an interesting guy. 33 years in the league with Baltimore and with Miami. 247 wins in the big leagues. That is a lot of 347 wins is forever.
Well, and they had a list someplace today, and Belichick has got 304.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's 43 short. That's essentially 4 seasons. You would think Belichick has got maybe 4 seasons left in him.
Well, that's right. And and you take a look at the Tom Landry, the Vince Lombardis, the George Hallases, the Bill Belichicks. And you certainly have to consider Don Shula in that. Not only was he was an innovative defensive coach, and I understand it's hard for me to see this grandfather image being gruff and intolerant, but I understand he could be quite gruff and very intolerant, like most championship courses coaches are. He's going to ride the same bus.
When he was in the middle of his, by the time I realized NFL football and everything else and realized who Don Shula was, it was already probably pretty close to the 80s. And he had already coached for a lot of years by that point. He always came off to me as kind of the slick, smooth operator, the kind of the hair was always perfectly done and everything else. And the teams knew that he was in charge though. And it was almost, I don't want to say Godfather like, but it kind of like he was in charge. And it was his way, and a lot of the coaches that way were that at that time were that way. So when he was coming through, the Miami Dolphins were always a team that were in the playoffs. They were always a contender, and when they weren't, it was a huge surprise.
Oh, he had a couple of teams. I mean, 4 or 5 that were below 500. He never even went below 500. But yeah, Tim, he had a great attitude, a terrific intellect, and just style, like you say. On top of that, he had some very good football players.
Oh, that helps.
And Larry Zonka said about him is something like, there is a reason there's one perfect team every 100 years, and that was Don Shula. And so, and I would imagine a guy like Larry Zonka and some of the rest of those guys, they do worship the man. I'm talking about, of course, the 72 team that was perfect, the only one that's ever been.
Yeah, when New England ran the table there and went 16-0, it certainly looked like they would win the Super Bowl and put that they would become the best team ever and would go 19-0 and the rest of that. But that wasn't the way that it worked out, and Miami sits there and holds the only team in the Super Bowl era to go undefeated all the way through the season. So yeah, Shula, like I said, just kind of. It was just interesting that he was 90 years old. He hasn't coached for how long? And you think, well, okay, what age was, 60, 65 years old? And that's kind of when these guys finally say enough's enough. It's time to go and relax and enjoy life a little bit. And like I said, with Belichick needing 4 more seasons, is that something that drives Belichick to stay in there and try to keep winning,
I sometimes think Coach Belichick is just a little bit different. I'm not sure that he has any other choice but to coach football. I think he was to coach football. And so I take a look at him and you just think the day that he has to walk is going to be a real difficult day for that man.
Yeah, it's going to, with all the changes in New England, it's going to be interesting to see how things transpire. I hate to say it this way. Was it Tom Brady why they were so good for all those years? Or is it Belichick the reason why they were so good? And, we really don't know for sure which one maybe, which came first, the chicken or the egg type of thing. And we'll have to see what happens. But it's going to be very interesting. And speaking of Tom Brady, it was very interesting to see that Las Vegas, one of the gambling places out there, came up with a line that Tampa Bay is like over under 9.5 wins for next year. And that was more than a lot of other teams. And I'm kind of like, wow, the betting line is interesting. They want people to come out there and spend some money.
Yes, they do.
On this, because I mean, I'm not saying Tampa Bay last year was a bad team, but for them to get to 9.5 wins, to get to 10 wins, I think we're stretching things a little bit. So I don't usually go out and gamble a whole bunch, but boy, I'll tell you, that one caught my attention. Like I could go drop a $50 bill on that one, and I'd like to take my chances on that one and see what happens. But
well, and I mean, Eli Manning said about Tom Brady, he is going to have a tough time adapting down at Tampa Bay, and and Eli knows what it's like for an aging quarterback to come and rally. And I imagine having the big Gronk is there, that'll help. And there's and I mean, they do have football minds. These guys, they really can turn some remarkable stuff. So who's to say that they won't be able to do a little something down there? But it's going to be a tough go. There's going to be no give-me's for Tom Brady.
So what do you think about Cincinnati cutting Andy Dalton this past
weekend? Andy Dalton's kind of an interesting guy. Like, he's going back to Texas. He went to TCU, and I'm thinking, this is going to be all right. He gets to sit back and work behind Doc for a few years or whatever, and I'm going to tell you, Teddy Bridgewater last year inspired a whole lot of backup quarterbacks. And look at what Teddy Bridgewater's doing this year. So, I mean, these guys are all good, and you don't know where they're going to pop up out of. So I think it's a pretty good move for what else was he going to do anyway?
Yeah, I think I was just interested. Cincinnati decided, look, we're not going to have any quarterback if we have a season. We're not going to have any quarterback controversy. We're going to cut them, and we're going to let this all happen, and we're going to let Joe know, you're our boy. We're riding you. We're gonna do whatever we can do for that. And so I think Andy Dalton was they didn't want Andy really there anymore anyway, but they had to get rid of him. And I just thought it was the right decision for them to move on, do it as soon as possible. And
keep in mind he gets $17 million for a backup job. That's you take it when you can get it. It's. And the other guy I want to talk about is Mitchell Trubisky from Chicago. He was he has had an up and down deal since they first got him, and it's and so he is not going to get an extended contract. He's going to go back on a 1-year contract, and he's going to be wondering about that, especially with all the quarterbacks flying around these days.
Yeah, I've never been a Trubisky fan. A couple of years ago, it looked like he was going to be the next great thing, and everybody was worried when Chicago got Khalil Mack and blah 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 and everything else. And then, like I said, Trubisky. I think we might have talked about this, or I talked with somebody in the last week that a guy can look good for a year or two, and then defenses adjust, or vice versa.
Yes.
And they learn how to, and the great players can adapt and find new ways and stay above the fray. So it'll be interesting to see what Trubisky does after he had a subpar last season. Does he learn, and does he come out a better quarterback out of it? And I think that's the big thing about a lot of these quarterbacks, that sometimes when they face that adversity, does their confidence get destroyed, and they never come back from it. So I'll be interested to see what happens with Trubisky this season, if we have a season.
And I'm watching the morning sports show, and they're talking about next year's draft already, and they're talking about Trevor Lawrence, and they just everybody's going to be watching him come back, and was he better than Burrows, and it goes on and on and on and on.
And remember, we just got done talking about the fact that at this time last year, Burrows was a number 6. It was a
16 quarterback.
He went all the way to number 1. So can Trevor Lawrence? He won't drop from the supposed number 1 overall to round 6. At least we wouldn't think so. But it's going to be interesting, because what if there's a abbreviated college football season, or what if there is no college football season? How does that affect what the NFL looks at and does for next year at this time?
Well, I don't know. It gets a little bit crazy, and the NBA is talking about having a shortened season next year, not start until December or end of November, and then continue their season from there. So I think they're trying to scramble for just about every kind of contingency they can come up with, and I guess I would be if I were them as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the NFL schedule is coming out on Thursday night.
Yes, they are.
And ESPN is going to do a 3-hour special on the NFL schedule.
On a schedule that might not take place.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, they just got done with the draft, and then they decided to come out with the schedule, and they're going to do 3 hours. And I say only 3 hours? I mean, come on. There's how many games to discuss, now they've added another game to the schedule, so there's 17 games and all the rest of this stuff. And of course, I think about, when Jim Brown set the record, 1,863 yards, I think, way back in the 60s, He did it on a 12-game schedule. Then the juice came along. O.J. Simpson came along, and he broke 2,000 yards, but he did it in a 14-game season. And everybody's like, oh, it's not as good as Jim Brown. And then Eric Dickerson came along and went 21-05, and I think 84 or 85, whenever it was. And everybody's like, well, he had a 16-game season, so it's not as good as O.J.'s, and it's not as good as Jim Brown's. Now we're going to have a 17-game schedule. So now when somebody goes over 2,000 yards or gets 1,000 yards receiving or 5,000 yards passing, are we going to have to put all these asterisks next?
Yes, that's exactly what we're going to have to do. I mean, after all, did Roger Maris break Babe Ruth's record?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
It took him 6 more games.
I understand what the purists or the old timers say and everything else. So it's going to be interesting. Because, when they come out with the NFL schedule, a lot of people start planning vacations. So the Vikings might be playing, and I'm picking a team that I haven't looked at their schedule enough to know who they're playing. But I'll just say, let's say that they're going to be playing Miami. Well, hey, if they're playing in Miami in like late November, the Vikings fans are going to be going berserk trying to get to Miami to
They sure are.
So it's going to be interesting to see how many people plan vacations. And so
the NFL did cancel all their international games for next year.
I did see that. That was a very good idea.
Yeah.
Very good idea. I don't think they really had any choice on that one.
Let me ask you this. Marshawn Lynch is back in the picture. I mean, so, how long has he been around and how old is he?
Marshawn Lynch has probably been playing since.
He had a good comeback last year. And I hope he comes back and I hope he's successful. But it seems to me just a little bit pipe dream there.
Yeah, I think, he came in at the end of the season. He was fresh and made some things happen. We talked about Percy Harvin last week. He's been gone for how many years and wants to come back. And, it's interesting how some of these guys walk away and then come back. I saw on SportsCenter, they had Mike Tyson beating the crap out of him.
Yeah, I saw this.
And they were all like, look how hard he can hit. And I'm like, guys, remember a boxing match is like 36 minutes, 12 rounds. He showed you like 36 seconds of hard hitting. Can he do that for 36 minutes? And I say absolutely not. It's crazy to think that he's got great power. Could he come out and finish you off in a round or a round and a half? Maybe. But if somebody decided to play the rope-a-dope game with him and did Muhammad Ali on him, they would probably have a tough time.
Have you seen the size of some of these heavyweights that are going these days? They're incredible.
They were saying today they thought Tyson Fury might be like a foot taller than Mike Tyson is, and I'm like, that's crazy.
Swatting up. That's like going for a rebound, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So
another thing, sports is moving around a little bit. May 17th, NASCAR opens up down at Darlington, South Carolina. I don't think they're going to have any fans, and they're going to be racing around all over the place. But NASCAR is giving it a shot. I'm sure those guys are going crazy down there. What they're having a hard time doing is scheduling. Daytona has 100,000 people. There's a lot of people going to those things, and they can't have that.
Yeah, it's like I said, can they do something like what Miami is proposing and try to keep the people apart a little bit? And the answer in my mind is absolutely not, because what do you do when you go to a NASCAR race? You go out and you do some tailgating beforehand.
Oh, for 2-3 days.
And that's kind of the thing that goes on. So it would be very interesting to see if if they could ever do that. And it's scary to think about what the new the guidelines that have been coming out over the last few days with the number of new cases that they're expecting and with the states that are reopening, including our Minnesota reopening some things, and some states basically reopening everything to a certain extent. And we're gonna see. I hate to say we're gonna see a spike, and it's gonna be interesting to see how people handle that and how it moves us forward, because I think that's part of the thing. We have to open certain things up to see what happens and see how things progress. And I know some people out there, including my sister, would probably like to strangle me for saying that. But at the same time, I think we got to find out what's going to happen a little bit too.
Well, we do, and this, we can't stay like this way forever. But I did notice that St. Cloud right now is one of the epicenters for the virus, and so it is going to move around, and it will affect us. I guess we have to decide how much we're willing to let it affect us. So, yeah, there's both sides of the argument there. There's that is certainly true. I got a couple of other things here, Tim. Louisville is charged with 3 allegations by the NCAA today. And
They never learn.
No, and Rick,
they need it. They need an SMU, is what they need. They need a death penalty type sanction because, and I know the NCAA says they would never do that again, but there's some of these programs that are on the hook all the time, and it's how are you going to stop it? And the only way you stop it and wake people up is SMU was what, in 83, 4, 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Some school, some program's going to have to take a big chunk of their whatever, and they're going to have to get sat on hard. Otherwise, this stuff is going to continue to happen. And I know,
this is the 7th school that they've done this to now.
Okay?
And Louisville and Patino are probably the best well known, but you're absolutely right. And it gets more complicated because now they're going to allow athletes to keep some money from their endorsements and things such as this. So, is
that going to make things better or worse, do you think?
What that remains to be seen now, doesn't it?
I mean, if a kid is going to be able to make, and I'll pick a number, $5,000 off of his likeness because of the things that he can do, because people are out buying his number 13 jersey, and he gets to keep some of that money or whatever, you would think that would stop some of the booster stuff and whatever else there is going on out there. And I don't know. I hope it does. I want to see college athletics stick around, but boy, you saw 3 of the top 10 freshmen basketball players saying they're going to go to the G League with the new program that the G League has, and we're going to take that route. And you're going to see, I think you're going to see more. And I think we've talked about this. Maybe I talked about this on my previous show, but NCAA baseball basically says if you want to go play Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, as a freshman, go ahead and go. Go do what you got to do. But if you come and play college, you got to say you don't get entered into the draft again until you're a junior. And to me, that is the way NCAA basketball should be doing this. And I hope this is progressing that way. Hey, if you come out of high school and you want to go the Moses Malone, Kevin Garnett route, and you want to go right into the NBA, we'll go let you play in the G League, and we'll let you get drafted the year after. But if you go play NCAA basketball, you need to stay for 3 years. And that's just, to me, let's see what happens. I think that is the way to go because, well, I got Drew Peterson's name on here. You know who Drew Peterson is?
Oh, no. Who's Drew Peterson?
Drew Peterson was the kid from Rice who entered the transfer portal.
Yeah.
He became a Gopher for about 4 days and then said, wait a minute, the NCAA may not say that I can play right away, so I'm going to pull my name. I might be back. And so what I see happening is we're getting into a worse identity crisis with these teams. It's like rent a player. I'm going to transfer. You don't know who's playing for anybody anymore. It's like, well, this kid was here. Now they're leaving. They're going to go there. It's I won't say I'm a diehard Gopher basketball fan. I follow along. I stay up to date. I cheer for him. But for somebody who's a casual fan, who's less than I am, how do you figure out who's on?
How do you keep it up?
You never know because Patino has decided to, rather than trying to recruit in kids for 4 years, well, I'll just take these kids that want to transfer and I'll go bark up their tree and tell them what we can do for them. And I'm not saying it's the wrong way. It's just that if you're trying to build a program on kids being known, your team being known, I don't like it. I mean, I probably can name more guys from the 1982 Gopher basketball team with Trent Tucker and Randy Brewer and all those guys than I can off the current team.
Yeah, I can too.
I mean, and I know that was in our wheelhouse, but you just can't keep track because these kids don't stay around long enough to know who the heck they are.
Yeah.
So I said I understand the rules. I understand we shouldn't make kids stay at a school when they're miserable. But I guess if you're going to let them transfer, then let them play. It seems like it's too random. The Gophers have hooked up with some guys and they're like, well, they should get to play right away, and then they don't. And so why isn't it the same for these kids? I mean, if you're going to transfer and you get a one-time transfer, let her rip. Let her do what it's supposed to do. So I don't know. It just seems like they're keeping the haves, and the have-nots are the have-nots. And some of these kids that decide to go to these schools that the NCAA doesn't want to see succeed, they don't get approved. But boy, I'll tell you, if Duke or Carolina or Kansas, they want a guy and they want to make him eligible, boom. Yep, he's eligible right now. No problems. You bring him in, we're good to go. So it just, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way it feels to me. So.
Listen, I've got as I do periodically, kind of a weird story. Periodically, okay. But all of our lives, we always watched great athletes become a pretty good entertainers. I mean, when I was a kid, Johnny Mac Brown, All-American from Alabama, was the cowboy. He was a matinee idol. And from there, hey, you remember Jim Brown doing the Dirty Dozen? He rearranged adventure films. And Rayford Johnson, he's an Olympic athlete, and he did all kinds of good shows. Alex Karras, Mongo. Who could think of a better actor than that? And Mark Harmon, who's done absolutely everything. All of these were great football players and great athletes. Chuck Connors played baseball for the Dodgers. But today
I was waiting
to talk about Thor Julius Bjornsson.
Oh.
Do you watch Game of Thrones? Did you watch any of the Game of Thrones?
I have not had HBO for years and years and years.
Well,
so I have never watched an episode.
There is a character in there called the Mountain, and this is Thor Julius Bjornsson, and he plays the Mountain. He's 6'9", and he's just under 400 pounds. Last weekend, he set a deadlift record of 1,105 pounds, lifted it up for 2 seconds. You should see this guy. He's from Iceland, and I mean, if the Vikings had people like him, they would have conquered the world. He is really a piece of work.
That was quite the shirt he had on when he lifted the other day.
Oh, you saw the lift then?
I saw the video. I got a tweet on it Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, whenever he did this. And when I saw him in that nylon shirt, it looked like to me, I was thoroughly like, oh my gosh. I even showed my wife and I said, holy smokes, look at this dude.
Look at this guy.
The V, everybody thought, I mean, this is like
no, he is to say he's got a large upper body would be an understatement, but he's a great actor. Now, I just got breaking news, red hot breaking news. It's about 8:00 this morning. Thor Bjornsson, the Mountain, will make his boxing debut against Eddie Hall, the guy who record he broke in the deadlift. Now, talk about a battle of giants, right? They're both in the 6'8", 6'9" range, all well over 300, close to 400 pounds. Okay, they're both part of the world's strongest men competition, and there's quite a number of them. But can you see these guys exchanging punches? And I just like that. You wouldn't want to get in the way of these, incredible sized athletes. And so Thor, he's right up there with Johnny Mac Brown now, as far as I can see, in doing Games of Thrones, and see what else he comes up with. But what a character and what a story. He does this at the Thor powerlifting school or powerlifting gym in Iceland. And Iceland's quite a place. I guess I've been there once, but they didn't have a lot else to do there. So they lift gigantic weights.
Yeah, I saw an E60 thing on Bjornsson, whenever it was, a couple of years ago. And they were talking about him being in these strongman competitions and everything else, and that he was in the show, and he just seems like he's a pretty down to earth kind of guy.
Oh, he does.
Got himself well centered and would be able to handle this kind of fame.
Yeah, no, you just don't know how many different and unique people there are in this world till you run into a guy like Thor. I'd love to meet him sometime and look up to him and say hi.
Way up.
Yeah, way up. Yeah.
And from a long ways away, because his chest is probably, So
ESPN covered the lift, and I think that they're probably going to cover the boxing match because on account of we don't have a lot of sports, so they'll pick this one up. They would probably cover this otherwise, because I mean, he's got arms. I don't know how he'd even throw a punch, man. They're huge. They're 35, 36 inches around.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Then the only other thing that I got is this weekend, of course, it's fishing season. Now,
I thought you were going to say it's Mother's Day.
Well, I actually should say something like that, because although my mother's passed, my children's mother is still here, and I should take good care of her. She's she's necessary.
She is necessary. There you go.
Very necessary.
Let's talk fishing.
The fishing, the season coming right now, people have been locked up in their house for 2 months. They are going to bust a gut to get out. And so the weather is still pretty cold, and it's got to warm up a little bit, get a little sun before the fish come out. But I have an awful feeling that there's going to be a lot of people, for the sake of at least getting out of the house for a few hours, that are going to go fishing. The water is cold. The fishing is probably far and few, and they're going to probably have to travel some to get it. But, I just want to make sure everybody takes good care of himself. And if you got a boat full, and that's probably likely, hang on to these good folks and, get back to us. But yeah, fishing.
I would think Black Bay would be a very popular destination for a fisherman this weekend.
Well, and that's where I'd go.
I will say that I'm not much of a fisherman, but I guess if somebody said, "Hey, where would you go fishing this weekend?" there would be my 2 cents worth in, and I'm sure there's some people out there who fish Black Bay year-round type of thing, saying, "Keep your mouth shut, Ringer. We don't need to be telling people to go to Black Bay." The 70 people or so that probably watch us, and anyway, I hope everybody goes out and has a safe time and does things. My dad, absolutely, when I was growing up, absolutely positively had to be on the water for the opener.
Yep.
It didn't matter if it was raining, cold, snow. It did not matter. He was going to be on the water, and God bless him that he didn't make me go when I didn't want to go for those, because the opening to me is madness.
It is.
Waiting in line to get your boat in the water, waiting in your line to get your boat out of the water, depending upon where you go. So to me, yeah, it's good to get back out there and fish, but it was much more fun to go the second weekend to go fishing, because there was probably like half the boats. And the fishing was probably a little bit better because it had warmed up a little bit more, and et cetera, et cetera. So I give it up to the diehards, guys and gals who go out there and fish that opening weekend. But boy, that is not for me. We were going to go down and deal with 40,000 crazies at the NCAA wrestling.
Yes, we were.
A month and a half ago, and people thought we were probably nuts for going out and you don't like crowds, Ringer. Why? I guess you go do what you got to do to make things happen, what you enjoy doing. So
yeah, people right now would do just about anything to get with a good crowd and watch a good sporting event. Wow. They're that hungry. They want to go see a movie. They'd like to see a play. All our summer concerts are canceled. The Big Top and Base.
I just saw that.
Season's canceled. We had an Elton John concert that's been canned. And so, as of right now, boy, there's not a whole lot of activity going on this summer. So maybe if that's the way it's got to be. I do know that a lot of the fishing competitions have been postponed and delayed and stuff. So this is going to have an effect on our summer. There really is. On the other hand, I can see people heading for the lake this weekend.
Absolutely. I got one more thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about Gopher softball if I can for a minute. And we lost our head coach, and I say our head coach because she was a Minnesotan from Duluth, and Jamie Traxel, and she left to go to Ole Miss. And I'm like, why would you leave a team that you just took to the College World Series and go to the SEC, which just like in college football is the granddaddy of the conferences? But it came out after the fact that she was supposed to make $140,000 with the Gophers.
Yeah.
Too shabby. I was surprised.
I didn't think so, yeah.
I was surprised it was that low, however, because our head football coach makes about $4.5 million or whatever he's making. So she got over $100,000 raise to go to Ole Miss, up to $245,000, and they gave her a multi-year contract. Now the Gophers, they wouldn't give her a multi-year contract. What
was that about?
What was that about? What is going on that you got a person, a coach who took a program that was pretty good. The Gophers were always pretty decent and took them to the next level. And you got a person here who's from Minnesota that you would think would want to stay. And they decided that, well, we don't want to give you a full year contract because you're not a money making sport. Well, what would it have costed the university to keep her? Would she's making 140, would split the difference? Let's say she was going to make 200,000. Okay, for the next 3 years. Let's say they gave her a 3-year contract. Let's say they gave her a 5-year contract. Okay, so it was going to cost the university 300,000. Well, Fleck makes 300,000 in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, what? We lost maybe our best head coach over, and I know some people would say $60,000 is a lot of money. Not at that level, it's not.
No, it's not.
$60,000 is nothing. So the pitching coach was just named the head coach, Piper Ritter. So I wish her best of luck and hope that she can keep this thing going. Getting Amber Pfizer back for next year, she already said she's coming back, is a big part of that. And we'll see what happens. But I want to see that Gopher softball team and baseball teams, and I would have been great to see the Gopher baseball team to see what they could have done this spring. I mean, I was seriously thinking we got a chance to go to Omaha. I would have been there with bells on to try to be there to watch that, and it's just unfortunate.
You were wound up from the first games that they had at at Federal Stadium, whatever it is. I mean, they have a good team, and they've consistently had good teams. And softball as well. Plus the fact is, I knew the Traxel family in Duluth, damn fine family, and I would imagine she brought a lot of class to the situation, and that's why she got a raise.
That's right. So what'd you listen to or read this week? Mine didn't.
I'm still reading my Eric Larson book, and I'm getting close to the end of that. It's amazing how fast that goes. And in the last couple of nights, I've been digging out. We dug out an old album. I'm just trying to think of the name right now. I'm having a brain freeze. But we've been taking up old stuff and putting it on, and old Jeff Beck music. In fact, when you called up, I had Jeff Beck picking guitar, playing old rock and roll blues. I mean, from the 50s. And so Jeff Beck he's always a regular. I don't know. I just go over there and pick up and plot it down and see what we have. And I've got some great old records in there. So it all comes out every night. Today is Cinco de Mayo. Sue's going to go get us some Mexican food, and we're going to come back and we'll we'll have a couple of Cinco's and a couple of De Mayos and listen to some music and have a couple of beers and celebrate.
Sounds good, my friend. We'll have a good week, and same to everybody out there. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Good luck
Yes.
to women, and I guess
Please take care of you folks.
And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Hey, my friend, you take care too.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Bye.